I'd like to call this meeting to order and welcome all of you here. It's so nice to see a full crowd, and I hope it's an enjoyable evening for you. But anyway, welcome. If you'll please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll start the meeting off that way. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. First, we have approval of the agenda as it was written.
Make a motion that we approve the agenda as published.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda as it was published. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion is adopted. Public comment. Nobody has signed up for public comment, but if any member of the public out there would like to make comments at this time, they're welcome to do so. Okay, I don't see any, so we'll go on to information items and reports. And we're very pleased to have the principal of Southside Elementary School here, Jackie Johnson, and some of her students to give us a little briefing and introduce us to you. So, Jackie.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Southside Elementary School. I have a few highlights and then some student recognition, students to celebrate, okay? This has been quite a week for Southside, and so let's just talk about just this week. Just this week. Just this week. Here we go. We started last Tuesday with the Swamp Rock Fiddle Camp. This was brought to us by the PAVE, Panhandle Alliance for Education, and Kelly Tubino is a professional fiddler who's developed a technique to teach students dynamics, basic chords, basic fiddling in 3 easy lessons. Did you do it? Okay, watch this. 3 lessons and then a recital. I wrote just a couple of short videos because it's just too fun.
Oh.
Okay. He starts his recital with a folk story, and students use the fiddle to show a few dynamics and techniques. I'll show just a portion of this. Hang on. You want to start about right there.
And then yet a third breeze began to blow. It died down to a whisper, and then went away. And then lo and behold, raindrops began to fall. And it rained, it rained, it rained. The swamp filled up with water, and the frogs were saved. And the frogs began to croak again. Southside Elementary School, a herd of cows suddenly started to move. Out of nowhere, a herd of horses galloped by. And off in the distance, a lone coyote began to town. And they all lived happily ever after. Awesome job, 6th grade.
You know, the fiddle was fun, and he lowered the, the inhibition, and kids just joined in and had fun. And look what he had them doing in, like I said, the 3 short lessons. This was the recital, and every student got to have an individual recital. This is 2nd grader Ezra.
impressive.
Yeah.
Amazing, right?
Uh,
And so that was awesome. That was an awesome celebration of fiddle music. And at the end, every student got a certified bona fide fiddle playing card. So that if they came across a friend, they could bring out their card and say, yes, I am certified bona fide fiddle player, right? Okay. That was Thursday, was the recitals. There we go. And then Thursday night, we moved from an informal fiddle music to an evening formal band concert, right? And oh my gosh, they dressed up and students played so many solos. And this was their first concert. So here we see a couple of students. Here's a few more. Then on Monday, gosh, that was just yesterday, right? Monday, it was Veterans Day, and we honored veterans at Southside by inviting them into the library to share with the students. So every 30 minutes, another group of students would come in, and then the veterans could sign up either for the whole morning or just this session that coordinated with their child or grandchild. So here you see 8. We had far more than that, but 8 veterans. And then after the library sessions, they went to the cafeteria where we had red tables all decorated and special cafeteria lunch for them. So that was Veterans Day, and that was in the morning. In the afternoon, because Thursday is parent-teacher conference, we moved our STEAM exhibitions to Monday. Students did their STEAM exhibitions. And with their exhibitions, they rotate every 6 minutes in a way that every student gets the opportunity either to present individually or with a partner. So here on the left, we have Peyton presenting the history and of paper making and some papers that she made. And to the right, Aiden is presenting on his chessboard and the moves of the plays as well as the figures that he designed as his chess pieces. Here in the top left here is Dane presenting. His was Lego Zoo. It seems like we always have to offer a Lego because it's so popular. But this time we focused on zoo, and Bane's favorite habitat was the ocean. And you can't see in that blur, but that's where his reptile is. On the right, we have Randy presenting. And Randy was presenting on claymation. And her favorite part of the claymation was developing her little figurines. So a lot of technology behind that one. That's only 4 of the 11, okay? And while that was going on, veterans, STEAM exhibitions, we were also being visited by a STEM certification team. They were doing a site visit. So let me tell you a little background about that project. I have to exit again for just a second. How do I get out of here? Whoops, no, that's breaking the surprise. Quick, quick, quick. Last year we applied, and this year, the first part is to, okay. Get this bigger if I can. First, we had to collect evidence against 11 indicators. And the indicators fell in 3 categories. The category of the learner, the category of the educator, and then the category of the experience. So let me show you one of the indicators. And this is our STEAM certification site. And Lynette Leonard set this website up for us, and she was kind of the coordinator of the artifacts. Teachers, I need more for 1.5. Send me more 1.7. And this is an example of one of those strands. We wrote a narrative in response. This indicator is all about individually and collaboratively students are involved in inquiry-based learning. And so there's our narrative response, but then we have to gather artifacts. And our artifacts, here we collected, the first one is from our garden exhibition. The students are dehydrating apples as a way of harvesting the garden. In the middle one, it's all about challenges, predators and preys, predator and prey. And on the right is the students work together to come up with some ideas for their Ferris wheel. And Thane wrote down the plan, and this was his creation for the Ferris wheel. So for each indicator, we had to go through this process. Then, back to this, they interviewed teachers, students, some of them were on the interview, and parents, and community partners, 48 people in all, to help verify our artifacts and get to know us as a STEAM school. And then they did classroom observations. They spent 20 minutes in every teacher's classroom against the Elliott rubric, deciding if the students were really truly engaged, if the students had technology, on and on. It was a very rigorous process. And are we relieved? Yes. Because we are certified, bona fide STEAM certifieds. This is a big deal in several ways. In the state of Idaho, we are number 5. There's only 5 of us so far. And there's financial support behind that. Each year the legislature approves, but the trend has been $10,000 a year for being STEM certified. So that'll go a long way in providing extras for our STEAM program. And you know, Idaho's bar is higher than most states, and so it truly is an accomplishment for our school. Tomorrow we start learning celebrations, but right now, let's celebrate our students. Okay. As I call your name, will you come up front, up here? Alyssa Porter. Alyssa remembers to do her job at the K3 milk distributing, and she respectfully dismisses herself from the classroom to do this job. Also in STEAM class, Alyssa worked successfully with other students in order to design 3 different timepiece projects. She is a focused scholar. Next is Juliet Evans. She takes her volunteer job as a bus monitor very seriously. She has volunteered for this job twice, both as a 4th grader and again this year as a 5th grader. This job requires her to communicate with other adults and at the same time maintain order with K-6 grade students, and this is not an easy job, let alone for a 5th grader. Next up is Austin Leonard. Austin is confident, positive, and a great role model for our school. He has shown excellent maturity and has the ability to set goals and be persistent in achieving them. Austin is great at his job. He also works at dismissal. He's careful and thorough to ensure that all students receive those important transportation changes and are dismissed in a safe and timely manner. Thank you, Austin. Next up is Sam, and I don't see Sam here. Sam told me he didn't think so, but he's in kindergarten, so I wasn't sure if he really knew. But let me tell you about Sam. Sam is one of our younger budding engineers. He already stands out as an outstanding engineer. He naturally thinks out loud, he asks questions, he imagines and plans and does it all in every setting. He's a joy to watch learning. I told him he would get his award tomorrow. Teague is up next. Teague is a role model for our SOAR, safety, ownership, attitude, and respect. He conducts himself in a safe manner in the classroom, the gym, and the playground. Teague takes ownership of his artwork. He puts forth a great effort, even when projects are challenging. He is kind and has such a wonderful, positive, and confident attitude. Thank you, Teague. Brett, come on up, Brett. Brett is always accountable and responsible throughout the day, and he demonstrates positive character traits. Brett is a positive role model for our school. Brett, I so enjoyed your STEAM exhibition. Thank you. And the next four are going to be presented by Ms. Benno.
Hello, I'm Karen Benno, and I happen to be the coordinator for the Southside Mars Rover design competition team. And so I would like to bring up 4 students to recognize them for their participation in the 2019 Mars Rover Design Challenge. Their team was called the Space Farmers. The Idaho Tech Mars Rover program requires a lot of time and personal commitment. Our students meet after school for almost 6 months, plus they put in a lot of lunchtime meetings. They build a rover, a remote control rover, using Legos and other components that has to meet certain tasks designed by the NASA Idaho Tech Mars Rover program. These 4 students constructed their rover to meet the 4 tasks that are replicated of the Mars terrain. They recorded their meeting and design process in a data lab notebook. They created teamwork visual graphic display posters, and they made a PowerPoint presentation that they had to present before a panel of judges. The students developed 21st century learner skills in teamwork, collaboration, communication, problem solving, and critical thinking. Their hard work and their teamwork paid off because they earned 2nd place overall in the regional Mars Rover competition. So I'd like to recognize the efforts of Mackenzie Norris, Riley Vernon, Thane Murphy, and Clayton Newsom.
So was that your Mars Rover shirt?
Yeah.
That's everything.
Okay, and I just have to add that I got an opportunity to meet the STEM certification team, and Dale Kleinert from Advanced Ed led the team, and so it was led by peers and also Dale, who goes around to all the schools, and they were very impressed with Southside, and it was a great opportunity. It was very thorough in multiple days that they spent time, so it was very, anyway, congratulations, and it was very well deserved.
And Tom, I have to add that Karen, Jaylene, Lynette, we're a small staff, and it's a group effort.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Stand, you know, it's-
Yeah, we would like the students to come this way. We have a certificate for you, and then afterwards we'll get a picture of all of you.
Oh, Alyssa?
You
Congratulations.
gotta
Oh,
pass this
you,
one
you
here.
have to go shake
Everybody
all their
wants to shake your
hands.
hand. You're famous today.
You got to give a
Juliet?
picture of each one of them.
Thank you. Congratulations.
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 Austin?
Nice going.
Good
Congratulations.
job, Austin. Thank you. You're welcome. T?
Good job.
Good job,
Congratulations.
T. Brett?
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Brett. Clayton? Congratulations, Clayton. Mackenzie? Congratulations.
Nice work.
Riley?
Nice going.
Congratulations. Thanks. Good job. Congratulations.
saw you on that field.
Yeah, congratulations.
All right, time for a picture.
So, yeah,
Real quick.
yeah. Let's just,
All right, now we're gonna have a picture. We gotta
so
make
taller
sure
in the back,
taller in the
shorter
back, shorter in the front.
I'll be in the back.
If the board members can actually get to the side of the thing a little bit, that way. That way your face isn't lit up by the. Yeah, there you go.
We're highlighting.
Oh yeah, you guys, I have a wide, so you guys can get on the side of Lonnie over there. Everybody in. Everybody in.
We could take another over here.
I'll
Right over here. We got room right here.
We got room for it.
Good job, buddy. Okay, yeah, that's good.
Looking good, dude.
All right, I'm just gonna get in front of everybody here.
You're fine.
Okay. Oh, that looks good. All right, couple more.
Good job, guys.
We'll have a slight intermission here, so those of you that don't want to stay for the rest of the meeting are welcome to leave.
Give me a chance to eat my food.
There you go.
Yeah, that's really good. Tom, this was the document that we all got mailed to us.
Okay.
I mean, I see Dana's up next.
Right.
And
Yep.
that's all the stats on,
Right.
which is why I assumed. But look at,
Dr. Dunn?
Yes, he's here.
yeah, I saw it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, he's here.
Oh yeah, and I see Dr. Dunn and Dana.
Oh, I see.
He's gonna coordinate with Dana.
And, okay.
I don't know if I met you or not. Nice to meet you. Yeah, I know with them. Yeah, that's all. Yeah, that was awesome.
Lonnie, no kissing the audience, please.
Trying to make some points so she doesn't jam you.
Wrong on.
Congratulations. Sorry, Scott and Dana. It's like all of a sudden your crowd left. Hey, Wendy, you guys can move up now. Come on in. Yeah. I was like, tighten up the crowd. Oh yeah.
Hear from a broader audience, I guess.
Anyway,
Anybody for public comment tonight? That's good.
I know. I wonder.
Me too.
Yep. Moment by moment. I think you could start it back up. But it's up there. We'll talk about the hall. I know. Yes, yeah. She's up there. Yes, that's I'll get one. Yeah, exactly. I'm making Carrie's
If they would have known we were going to be here, this place would be
They would have stayed.
I know. I know. That's how it always is.
okay, we'll go ahead and reconvene at this time and welcome our guests and welcome Dana here to hear from you on immunization and vaccines and what we can do to improve our.
Yeah, we can improve a lot.
Okay, well, you have the floor.
This is Dr. Dunn, and he is going to do a little presentation first, and then I'm gonna slip in with the exemptions that are related to school specific, or district specific.
Yeah.
Right.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to
just jump right in, but please ask questions or interrupt me if I'm going along and you see something you're not sure about. We've got 57, no, I'm just kidding. Why are childhood immunizations important? There's 3 reasons: to protect our children, to protect others, and to protect our communities. So let me just start out by kind of going through a study that came out last year that really looked at the non-medical exemptions in state and counties. And you'll get the reason that this is so important for us, I'll get to in a second here. But this study showed that since 2009, so in the last 10 years, 12 of the 18 states that currently allow non-medical exemptions, the number of exemptions has been rising. So medical exemptions are, and I'll get to it, but things like allergies or contraindications, precautions, reasons that we can't actually vaccinate people. Non-medical exemptions fall into 2 categories. That's either religious exemptions or philosophical exemptions. Personal exemption, basically personal beliefs. So 18 states have both of those, including Idaho. Now, in this study, it was interesting. They looked at hotspots, metro areas, large areas that stood out for their very large number of non-medical exemptions, and it turns out Spokane was one of those, and Seattle, and Portland, and Phoenix, and a bunch of others. Now, and that's important too, and I'll come back to that. But of the 14 states analyzed by county by county, Idaho has 8 of the 10 highest non-medical exemption rates based on MMR data. That's measles, mumps, rubella. They had to pick one vaccine to kind of use as the index. There's a whole bunch of vaccines, as you know, and some kids get some kids get all, some kids get none. So they had to pick kind of one as a marker, and they picked the MMR as their marker. So using that one, you will see that Idaho is in the yellow here. So this line is Idaho. And you can see that the non-medical exemption rate statewide is about 6.2%. 6.2. Remember that, 6.2%. Here is the county by county ranking, and it's a little blurry, but you'll see number 2 is Bonner County. The non-medical exemption rate, 19.6%. 3 times the state average. And second only to Camas County, which I'm sure everybody's familiar with Camas County. No, of course. Camas County only has 1,000 residents in the entire county. It's a very small population county in central Idaho. Their non-medical exemption rate is higher, but for all intents and purposes, I think we're first. At 19.6. And you'll see that Kootenai County ranks number 8, 14.9%. Boundary County, 14.6%. Still very high compared to the statewide average. Remember, it was 6.2%. So Northern Idaho is sort of represented strongly in this group. So using the index of measles, mumps, rubella, I'm just going to give you some statistics about measles, especially because there was this recent outbreak in the country, including the outbreak that was in Clark County, Washington this past year. So just to give you some perspective, before 1963, when the first vaccine was introduced in the United States, there were 3 to 4 million cases of measles every year, 48,000 hospitalization, and 500 deaths every year. Measles is one of the most contagious diseases known. And with the vaccine introduction in 1963 and then subsequent attempts to eradicate measles, it was thought to be eliminated by the year 2000. Unfortunately, as we all know, there have been now recurrent outbreaks around the country, typically occurring in pockets where there are unvaccinated children. And as the graph showed before, the states that have the non-medical exemption, both philosophical and religious, tend to have the highest numbers. Just for an example, the outbreak in Washington State, which was primarily down around the Vancouver area last year, 82% of the cases were school-aged children. So this is predominantly in children. Only 4 of the cases out of 86 were known to have been fully vaccinated. So the vast majority were either not vaccinated or not completely vaccinated. There's measles. In case any of you haven't seen a case of measles, that's what it looks like. There's a rash that becomes generalized, fever, cough, red watery eyes, runny nose. That's the common symptoms that you see with measles. Complications including pneumonia, ear infections, diarrhea, and then fortunately fairly rare encephalitis, which is infection in the brain and about 2 to 3 deaths per 1,000. So potentially fatal illness that is largely vaccine preventable. Death typically occurs from pneumonia or dehydration. There is no effective treatment. This is a virus. There's no antibiotic for it. So first reason we want to do vaccination is to protect our kids, right? To protect them personally. If you are unvaccinated and you're in the same room with somebody who has measles, there's a 90% chance you're going to get it. And that can be in a room like this. 1 in 5 who get measles are hospitalized. 1 in 20 will get pneumonia, which is the most common cause of it. The second reason to vaccinate is to protect others. So unfortunately, some children have contraindications. They cannot be vaccinated even if they want to be vaccinated. They've either had a severe reaction to a previous component of the vaccine or maybe their first dose. They're pregnant, which is not very common in school-age kids, or they have a severe immune suppression either from a disease or for treatment for a disease like cancer chemotherapy, for example. So these people depend on others to get immunized to protect them because they can't get immunized themselves. Now I'm going to give you a case with her parents' permission. This is a patient that I have in my clinic, and I've been seeing her since she was born. She's 3 years old. She developed a post-viral childhood neutropenia, which means her white blood cell counts, her infection-fighting cells, went to virtually 0. And we didn't know why. So we sent her off to Seattle. She went to Children's, and it turns out this actually happens with some regularity. It's not completely unknown. The good news for her, for her personal health, is that she is not likely to have serious infections that might be commonly, like the common cold and sort of thing. But she's not able to receive this vaccine. The MMR vaccine is what's called a live attenuated vaccine, which means attenuated is like weakened. It's kind of a weakened version. Most people who have a normal immune system can take care of it easily, make antibodies, and they get immune from it. But in her case, because her white blood cell count is so low, it's relatively contraindicated because this weakened virus might actually cause illness. And it turns out about 1 to 2% of children have a medical contraindication. They cannot be vaccinated. Then there's another group, people who actually do get vaccinated, but yet they don't develop adequate antibodies. And this is true of all vaccines. In the case of measles, it's about 3%. So for reasons that we don't fully understand, 97% of people will get protective antibodies, but 3% don't, even though they've been fully vaccinated. So if you add those two groups, the people who can't be vaccinated and the people who fail to get adequate antibodies, it's about 4 to 5% of children and adults who remain medically vulnerable. So we vaccinate our kids to protect other kids who can't be vaccinated or who don't get adequate antibodies on their own. Then the third reason we want to vaccinate is to protect our communities. So this just gives you a sense of the scale of the importance of vaccines. So over the last 20 years, the CDC estimates that we've prevented 730,000 deaths in the U.S. with vaccination. And in the case of measles, the last major outbreak was in the early 90s, 55,000 cases. Fortunately, the most recent outbreak didn't get that large, but there were 1,250 cases. So if you remember back to the math, I told you that 2 to 3 deaths per 1,000 was the rate. So in this outbreak last year, you know, there were a handful of deaths, potentially preventable. Almost all cases were, again, unvaccinated. So to protect our communities, it requires this herd immunity. That is, most of us have to be vaccinated in order to prevent the spread of these illnesses. And generally, what you'll hear is 85 to 95% vaccination is required in order to prevent the spread, and it depends on the contagiousness of the disease. And measles being very contagious and easily transmitted, experts tell us 94 to 95% is required in order to prevent the spread of the disease. Remember what I showed you earlier, due to non-medical exemptions, Bonner County is about 80%. 80%. I'll come back to that in a second. Turns out the World Health Organization says that vaccine hesitancy is one of the top 10 threats to global health. And measles has increased 30% as an example globally because of the reluctance to get vaccinated. So they convened this advisory group to identify why. Why is this happening? And I think this is really important for us as we think about how we could potentially respond as a community to reduce the exemption rate and to improve the number of people who are vaccinated. So complacency, which basically means if you've never seen it, you think it doesn't exist, or at least it's not important. So how many people have seen a case of measles? Not very many. Primarily because vaccination started in the 60s and most people are vaccinated, and so it doesn't spread in most communities, except in pockets where we have a very high exemption rate. So complacency is just, you don't realize or don't recognize it because you never saw it. Inconvenience actually turns out to be a big thing, and Dana and I were talking about that. So in Idaho, in order to be exempt, all the parents have to do is sign a form. It's much easier to just sign the form and be done with it rather than try to get your kid in to get a vaccine, make an appointment, go to the health department, whatever it is. You got to take time, you got to figure out when you're going to do it, etc. And then lack of confidence, which is sort of scientific skepticism. I think some people are just sort of skeptical about the pharmaceutical industry or about the science of the vaccines, whatever. So those are the three main reasons that the World Health Organization identified for, you know, maybe why there's a lot of vaccine hesitancy. And that I think the use of that term is very important. The majority of people that I talk to are not against vaccine. Now there are some that are clearly against, but most people are they're just not sure. They just heard something or read something, they're just hesitant. So I think that's important to recognize that there's a large group of the people who don't vaccinate their kids who are just vaccine hesitant. Okay. And this is my last slide. I'm just going to show you a simulation. Maybe Kelly, I'll have you come pull it up. It turns out the University of Pittsburgh put together a simulator that was just an illustration of what might happen, and they did it for most of the major population centers. They did not do Idaho, unfortunately, but they did do Washington.
Is that going to be live?
B.
Come on, baby. How do I get it?
Was it just a screenshot of it?
How do I click it here?
Is that an actual working model? Is that just a copy of the slide? First page, see if it comes.
Okay.
see this.
Maybe if we could just copy that address and put it into another webpage. So they didn't look at Idaho, but they did look at most of the other states, and including Spokane. So what I'm going to show you, hopefully, is a simulation of what would happen if a single case of measles walked into Northtown Mall and started infecting people. And what you'll see is there's two side-by-side simulations. One is a simulation assuming 80% coverage. Remember what I told you about Bonner County. Our exemption rate is almost 20%, while MMR rate is about 80%.
Sorry, no, I don't know where it went.
Versus,
Why will you help me?
versus 95%, which is what it takes to really have adequate herd immunity, is 95%. So the difference between 80% and 95% is profound.
Yeah.
And so the other thing, again, remember that when you look at the people who don't seroconvert, which is 3%, and the people who are medically contraindicated, 1 to 2%, the people who, just not because of anything they did, but just because of the circumstances are not protected, is 4 to 5%, which means mostly we have to have basically everybody else vaccinated in order to really prevent the spread of something like measles.
Which one's your presentation? HDC?
Why?
It was,
It's too small.
Isn't it the Y children?
yeah. I think
Second
it's,
to the bottom.
Second from the bottom there.
Covered on the national averages.
On measles vaccination,
Yeah, because you said Idaho was at 6.2.
6.2 is the statewide
Yeah.
non-medical exemption rate.
Right. You know what the national reference?
Well,
A lot of states don't let you have non-medical exemptions.
Go down to hyperlink.
California, New York, Washington just changed the MMR only to, you have to have a measles or medical.
so there's actually 3 states in the union that don't allow any non-medical exemptions. California, after the Disneyland outbreak of measles in 2015, California passed a law that got rid of all their non-medical exemptions. Mississippi and West Virginia. Mississippi and West Virginia.
Play, is it?
Okay, then see if we can select. Yes. Okay. And then scroll down here.
Way to go.
Needs Bill and that few.
Okay, no. I'm gonna start over. Restart. Okay. So this is, just watch this as it plays. You can see it's counting up the days. This is 80%, this is 95%. This is Spokane County, and this is what happens. That's we're at day 100 now. The red dots are active measles cases, the blue dots are recovered measles cases. That's the difference in the spread of measles. 80%, same as Bonner County, 95%.
Wow.
So in a typical epidemic running about 9 months or so, this is the difference of how measles spreads. So imagine one case of measles walks into Safeway in downtown Sandpoint, that's what would happen.
Yeah.
15 to 20 people per
Yeah,
one.
something like
about.
that. Each infected person walks around and infects something like 18 or 19 other people. And then they walk around and infect
So
18 or
what's the incubation period? How long is it before you even know you have any symptoms?
Yeah, that's the problem with most viral illnesses, even the common cold is
Yeah.
there's a prodrome where you're infectious before you really get sick. And it's about 3 to 4 days. So you're walking around, basically feeling good, maybe a little bit achy, but you don't get really sick, but while you're walking around, you're spreading it to other people.
Yeah, that's
Unless
exciting.
we give everybody an MMR shot on their way in.
Right.
That'd be my, that's
Okay, so
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
have some of the.
Thank you for scaring us,
Actually,
Dr.
I
Dunn.
put herd immunity in mine too.
You what?
I put herd immunity in
Oh.
mine too.
Okay, good.
And Mr. Albertson may want to add to that later. I don't, he probably doesn't.
She put some pictures of some cows.
Oh, I was
Her-
gonna
her-
say, you understand the herd.
I understand.
wanted to
I
introduce
understand.
Number 7. Okay.
Yeah. I understand those herds.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, just like Dr. Dunn said, the current required vaccines for Idaho school children, 5 DTaP, which is diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, 4 polio vaccines, 3 hepatitis B. Hepatitis B is the blood transfer hepatitis. Hepatitis A is the food transfer hepatitis. The 2 MMRs, 2 varicella, which is chickenpox. We have a case of chickenpox right now in the county. Middle school, you need 1 meningococcal and 1 Tdap. So that's a total of 20 vaccines. The current Idaho law allows parent or guardian to claim an exemption from immunization. You guys can read this. I don't need to read it to you. But they changed it this year, so you don't even have to fill out a form. You can go in and sign it and say, I, John Doe, do not want my son, I want him exempt from all vaccines. Dated September 15th,
Made it
2019.
super easy.
And we have to accept that. We do have a up-to-date list of pupils with exemptions, and our exclusions are a little bit different with each disease. So the stuff I put on here, I did each school population, and I only put the religious and philosophical exemptions. I didn't put if they had measles, or if they had chickenpox, or if they had a medical exemption. So you could see these. There's an incident number next to every school population. So if they decided they didn't want any vaccine, that one kid is going to have 20 incidents. So that's what the incident number is. And then the first number listed is the total number of students in that school that have exemptions. So we have 814 students in the whole district, and we have a total of 4,472 incidents. So there's 4,472 vaccines that people did not get in our district.
Of that 814 students.
Huh?
That
814 students, right.
So 1 out of every 4.5 students does this.
Right. So Farman's did well. They had 98 students, so they're sitting right at about 17%. Hope is at 28%. Kootenai, 12. Northside, 22. So they're all kind of in the same area. Homeschool Academy is a little bit higher because there's a lot of those kids that they're really against vaccines. So they will be staying home if we have an outbreak. Sandpoint High School, and part of the Sandpoint High School and the middle school and stuff is those guys did not get their meningitis vaccines when they should have, and they just kept on going, and they could still get them. So
They didn't get the
Sandpoint-
booster, you mean,
So you're supposed to get your meningitis vaccine where you go into 7th grade, and a lot of people miss that bump that are in the high school, of the ones that I read about. So on meningococcal only, which we earlier talked about measles, but meningococcal only also scares me because you can die in 24 hours. So that's 7th graders and up. There's 182 Sandpoint High School kids that don't have it, 79 middle school kids, and Clark Fork sitting at 28 with LPO at 16. We did have a meningitis outbreak at the middle school about 5 years ago, I think. And they had to send out letters and, make sure kids went and got the vaccine. MMR only, there's 591 kids who don't have it. So in the whole district-wide. So that is no vaccines or under-vaccinated. So like, the big four that I talk about, and I'm sure Dr. Dunn agrees with me, is measles is the big one, just because it's so highly contagious, and it's been in Spokane, and you know, it's very scary to me. So usually we exclude from schools, so exclude and exemptions, obviously you guys get it, it's two different things. So if we have more than 2 cases, then we can exclude the family members, the kids on the bus, in the grade school situation, you can, you know, go through everybody in the whole school that sits and eat lunch with them and has PE with them and stuff. So we keep that list pretty, you know, pretty up to date as much as we can. On all of these, as soon as you get a vaccine, you can come back to school. So, you know, I don't know why some of them would go get a vaccine. If they knew their kid had to stay home 21 days after our last positive measles vaccine, that can be up to a total of 3 months that your kid is home. With pertussis, those kids, a lot of times if a family member has it, they can have 5 days of antibiotics and then return to school. Varicella, which is chickenpox, that's also 21 days. That vaccine sometimes is not as, the efficacy of the vaccine is sometimes not as good. And that's School Board Policy 3520. We already talked about herd immunity, so I don't need to talk about it again. I don't want to just give us a problem, I want to be able to fix it. And I don't know if we can do newspaper articles, if we can offer vaccine clinics when there's registration, when people have parent-teacher conferences, when can we get a mobile unit? Rathdrum has mobile units. They come around or Lakeland School District has a mobile unit. If we give parents more information related to the vaccines and, you know, what they're protecting their child from, I think they get them. You know, it's just that everybody works. A lot of people work 2 jobs and stuff, and it's really hard. You know, they go to register their kid, and we say, "Guys, you're short on a DTaP, and you're short on an MMR. I just want to sign the form. I don't have time to do it." And that's what we get a lot of. And I think if there's a way we can clean it up a little bit, our numbers, you know, our vaccine rate would really go up. If we could make, you know, information available, like I said, at parent-teacher conferences, you know, have one of us hanging around. You know, I was talking to Mr. Albertson. I remember getting shots at school, and they just lined us up and, you know, gave us all shots. That's how old I am. Before you, thank you. I got the sugar cube though. That's right.
I did.
Mr. Albertson did not.
The only one in the class that got the shot. Everybody else got the sugar cube.
The other issue that has come up that I've found out is, so Idaho has what's called IRIS, and it's the information vaccine system that's through the whole state of Idaho. So when somebody goes into Dr. Dunn's office and gets a vaccine, like during the middle of the year, they turn it into IRIS, but we don't get that information. They don't just give it to us unless we go in and look it up. And a kid will come back and say, "Yeah, I got my shots," you know, and then, so who looks it up? Secretaries look it up. We can use that information from IRIS as their form that we can put in their file, but if it happens during the middle of the year, that IRIS just doesn't send that information to us. So, and I would like to have a nationwide system, because how many people move and lose those little yellow cards, and then we have to find out where they got their vaccines. Lonnie?
Is IRIS a state department
Health
of
and Welfare.
Health and Welfare?
It's part of Health and Welfare.
And you can't go online?
I can.
You can go online and
I can go
verify.
online and look up any kid, actually in the whole state of Idaho. I just have to have first name, last name, birth date. And it'll pop up if they've been vaccinated anywhere in the state of Idaho. And it isn't always accurate. I mean, I have found mistakes before. So the other thing that sometimes happens is in their zeal to get their kids vaccinated, sometimes vaccines happen Like, you're not supposed to have an MMR until you're 1 year old. Except when they had the outbreak, they were given them when they were 6 months old. So if you had your MMR, one of your MMRs before you were 1 year old, IRIS counted it as invalid. So it goes into not our exemption report, but it goes in as an invalid in our state report that goes back to IRIS. So I'm open to any suggestions to get people vaccinated.
So, yeah, and we're asking you, I mean, what's your recommendation? How can we?
I think if we really blast parents with information brochures and permission slips, they will sign a permission slip for their kid to get vaccinated. And I know we can get the health department to help because they came and helped. We vaccinated a ton of kids when we did the Bulldog at the sports field.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And that was, the health department came, and vaccines in the state, children's vaccines in the state of Idaho were all free. It's
Right.
just
This is
some people
making
get
them
charged
available.
for giving them. But if we're giving them at school, and I'm at school and giving vaccine, why would I charge for it? I'm already getting paid by the school district, so.
But if we have a vaccination clinic and we're expecting, you know, a lot of children, you're gonna need help, right? I mean,
Right.
is there?
We would need several nurses to man it, but I think Panhandle Health has 4 or 5 nurses. I went and helped those guys. I bet their nurses would volunteer to help, you know, buy them a pizza. And, you know, I mean, they hate seeing sick kids.
So how do we do this? Okay, we do this information blitz, and then do we have vaccination clinics, one
That's
school
what I
at a
think.
time?
And I don't know how we do it, because I was thinking there are so many schools, how do, Joyce?
So I have it.
One of the things we can talk about is we've had great success with our school clinic looking at therapy. And I would say parents not wanting to come to town to bring their kids. And so looking at the same model of that clinic, looking at a period of time at the beginning of the year, getting the response, and then setting up the clinic and just going through and being able to do it. And that's something Dana and I could do together. We could reach out to other physicians in the community. I do know that, you know, I've mentioned it to Kevin Nepper at Connecticut Health Services, and as a community health center, that's something they're very interested in. So I think it would just be sitting down and putting it together and proposing it, and then putting it into action. I think that's the biggest thing, and doing it during school hours. I think is
That's-
when
and I think that's
we
important.
have the kids. That's
Right.
the important thing.
Right.
Not on a Saturday or, you know,
People
on a
don't come
weekend.
to
They're not gonna show
No.
up. So it's during the
But we gotta have permission. It's not like when
We do
Tom
have
and
to
I
have
did
written
it. And
permission.
I'm sure when I got my vaccine, there was no permission slip.
Well,
You know, everybody that's lined up.
Actually, in the state of Idaho, can't you get your own vaccines when you're 12 years old?
When you're 18. So there's
So-
a window of time when you're 18, teenagers can consent for themselves and they can still get the free vaccine until they turn 19.
Yeah.
So there's a 1-year window.
But that's only a small
That's to
group.
catch up.
That's
with
small.
that, Yeah.
The
I have a
other thing
question.
To recognize is you only need one parent consent. You don't need both. And that comes up, you know, if dad says no
Right.
vaccines, but mom says she's okay with it. That's all you need. You only need one parent.
That happened at the clinic that we ran this fall. There were several people where, you know, the mom goes, well, I don't know, you know, Joe wants me to get the kids vaccinated. I'm like, hey, they're right here. Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Just about process. You talked about there's an easy form for the parents to say, yeah, I don't want this. What time is that physically in front of the eyes of the parent? When they're registering their child for school?
Like, what will happen is
So-
they'll register their kid and we'll say, you're short 4 vaccines.
So at that same time, can there be a piece of paper that's the same size that says, we will vaccinate your
Right.
children if you sign it?
That would be perfect.
So that we're offsetting the ease of, so then you have that piece of paper and then you go around school to school and you've got 20 kids over here who signed this instead of that because it was just as easy and it's not on the parent.
That would be perfect.
So that's new registrations. That's a great idea, okay?
Well, you have to register your
Every-
kid every year.
Every year you register, so
Yeah.
I don't know, it's just hard to simplify that.
You update, right?
Make
I mean,
it as
they
easy
have
to say
physically
yes.
come into Southside School and
We
register.
send sheets and they update
Oh,
Yeah, that's right.
Point
Just
of,
hack.
Carrie,
The other part
Carrie,
of
point
that-
of order. If you would like to make a decision on this, we can bring it back as a
Yeah, we're not
resolution at a
making
later
decision on
later date.
anything, no.
We're just hearing it.
This is a discussion.
The other option is a form on the LPOSD website that the parent could print.
Well,
And
it's one extra step, and the parents have already
I
done
like
this.
Geraldine's idea, when you got the leverage, you wanna register for school, this is what you
Yeah,
gotta
Phil,
do.
do you have something?
I just want to say, from being the most outlying school, that I can guarantee you what she said is an absolute fact, that if a kid needs shots, parents are more interested in just getting them into school, signing off, I don't need these, that I don't want them. That would be a way if we could just somehow have a paper that says, yeah, whenever
Just
the
as
school's
easy.
nurse or whatever's out there, I give permission to, and I think that'd be the most beneficial way to get this done.
And part of that, Phil, is education of the parents. Knowledge is power. So
Right.
if we,
First you
if
have
we
to-
present them with the information that they need, the efficacy of the vaccines, how it, reduces disease, and how it's protecting other kids. We have kids in the district that are getting chemo right now.
Yeah.
So, I wanna protect them too.
Okay, well, I think
I got more good
we spent
information.
enough time. I think
Scott's got
we realize the problem, and I think we can formulate some options in the future to discuss. We have some good ideas here, but we need to move on. Dr.
Just
Dunn?
one more comment. There was a study done in one of the West Ada County schools in Boise, where they looked at elementary schools who got their kids vaccinated for the flu. And what they found was there was a lower absenteeism from school, and so they had higher daily enrollment, which tied to funding, right?
We like that.
So by running the clinics, they actually got
benefited.
higher daily enrollment.
Right.
Interesting study, I can give it to you.
Yeah, that's,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Oh, sure.
Okay, well, we're gonna have to move on here.
Andrew is standing.
Andrew is next. Anybody standards-based report cards? Please enlighten us.
Good evening. Thank you. I'll be very brief, but thank you for the opportunity to give you a 5-minute update as it is Parent Conference Week. So many of our families are receiving their report cards, and I brought you a couple of hard copies.
And a photo from today.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
So as you may know, we're rolling out standards-based report cards across all elementaries. And this is not new, but it has been a multi-year journey in LPOSD.
Right.
So last year alone, I believe I collected somewhere over 20 samples of different elementary report cards that were being used district-wide. So we did not have total calibration of the information our families were receiving. So this has been a multi-year pilot. Northside has been using standards-based grading now. This is their second year. Hope, I believe, is rolling into their 4th or 5th. And then in all those years, we've had teachers piloting this process at every school and giving feedback. But this is our first year, K-6 district-wide. We're using the same report card. It's very exciting. So obviously that takes some communication. We started back in August, and I did give you a sample parent letter that really just outlines the key shifts. Showed our parents that we're using a 1, 2, 3, 4 scale, and gave them a heads up as to what's to come if this was new. Last week, then in between, schools have been doing quite a bit of communication. They've been asking us for some graphics and tools that are in parent-friendly language. We've been applying this 1, 2, 3, 4 scale to graded student work since the first day of school. So I wanted you to know that while it's conference week, the communication started, of course, earlier. In addition to graphics, we've been working hard on how we grade student work. So one of the most exciting pieces in my world as Director of Teaching and Learning is that we've worked hard on our common math assessments that we use at the elementary level district-wide. We've used professional development this fall to look at those assessments in teams of teachers and to create a common scoring sheet. So you will see an example in your packet that 3rd graders no longer receive, for example, a B on their math test. They no longer receive an 85%. They no longer receive different feedback classroom to classroom. We now have common scoring sheets because one of our goals and a premise behind standards-based grading is that it gives more specific feedback to students and families. So this example shows you that on one of our district assessments, the students near the end of chapter 2 in 3rd grade, they will have been working on some measurement and data concepts. Those come from our state standards, but also continuing to practice their fluency in addition and subtraction within 1,000 and applying in word problems. So as a parent, I might receive this cover sheet on a 3rd grade assessment and know that my student was proficient on the first 2, but couldn't apply those concepts in word problems. So now, as opposed to that B, or that 86%, I know what to help my daughter with. So with the teaching and learning hat, this is probably one of the most exciting pieces that we've been working hard on as a staff. And then you have a 3rd grade report card to end your packet. You will see that it is more specific than necessarily what we've used in the past. There's not an overall math grade, but math is broken out into those strands of mathematics that come from our state standards. What's printed on the report card was chosen by staff, representatives, and teacher teams who looked at the most essential concepts 3rd graders needed to know and develop. So you'll see not every single standard is printed on there because we couldn't have a 6-page document that gets cumbersome, but staff chose to group those in the same way that our state groups our standards. Other keys for you to know, and you'll see on the front of the sample I produced for you, is we use that 1, 2, 3, 4 scale. 3 is where we're aiming. 3 is really the target for our kids. Having the 4 is an exciting opportunity for kids to want to stretch and go above and beyond. It is also a positive challenge to our staff to provide opportunities for kids to do so. So there's a lot of research behind the 1 through 4 scale. We're excited about that. You will also see that these academics or these citizenship skills, kind of behavior skills, have their own key, which you've seen before. We use that plus for kind of the developing or a minus. And that's intentional, that we're keeping citizenship, behavior, dispositions separate from academic marks. So as a quick briefing, that's what we're most excited about, and this is the communication going out to all of our K-6 families this week.
Great. Can I?
So, I don't recall ever mastering the butterfly. So,
You will have many opportunities to show what you know in LPOSD.
I can fly.
We did produce a couple of these at principal request, actually, just different graphics that might resonate with families and be in student-friendly language. These are laying on the tables as we conference with families this week, so we're trying to have that message out frequently in ways that students and families can digest.
Was it Casey
I like
that had
it.
the other one? Cooking breakfast or something?
Creating pancakes.
Oh,
Pancakes.
And middle school,
Yeah.
at
That's
Sandpoint
right.
Middle School is indeed doing some piloting of standards-based practices
Right,
as well.
right.
Can I-
Comment, I think this is great. Especially for parents, because it not only, gives them the progress of their child, but it details, what skills they should be working on at their grade level.
Yeah.
And I asked Andrew to give you a briefing, though this isn't new, just that it's parent-teacher conference. So hats off to Andra for leading the teachers, but also for a lot of the schools, the first time the teachers will be educating the parents on this too. So we thought it was very good for you as school board members to know what they'll be communicating on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Kudos to our staff for developing all the tools behind it, but we know that it absolutely should serve our students and families. We're excited about it, so
Yeah.
That's great.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. Next, we have finance, and we have a financial update from our Chief Finance and Operations Officer, Lisa Howe. Good evening.
Evening.
Let's see, this will be brief, just capturing what's happened in the last 2 weeks. The first thing I just wanted to share was when our external auditor presented to you on October 22nd, he did not mention that as of July 1st, 2018, there was a change in the federal law for all public school districts. And the change says that in your budgeting process, as well as in the annual audit process, You must now report all expenditures by school whenever possible. And this is the outgrowth of legislators thinking that urban high-poverty schools are not receiving equal funding to urban high-income schools. And so the effective date was supposed to be July 1st, 2017, and that was just too much for state departments of education across the country. And I can't share how our State Department of Education will now create what's going to be required as a report card. And it would say, you know, I believe it will say Lake Pend Oreille School District, it will list our 12 schools, and then it will say expenditure per student cost.
But that's already supposed to have.
Right, so we have for the first time reported our audit to the State Department of Education. And now the next step on their side is, I believe, to create this,
Okay.
they're calling it a report card.
Okay.
Yeah.
Expenditure by school.
Okay.
Okay.
For us, it will show that our rural schools, the cost per student is considerably higher.
Yeah.
But they are taking, there are things that are exempted, you know, transportation, administration. There's almost 40% of our annual expenditures that we do not allocate out to schools, and I believe they're just going to break them out
divvy them up.
evenly. Okay, totally switching gears now. The Idaho State Tax Commission by law annually has to certify all state levies by October 31st. And so they've done that, and when we were in the process of projecting what our levy rate would be for our supplemental levy that started July 1st of 2019, a year ago about now, we projected $221 per 100,000 of net taxable value. And the calculated levy rate is 214. This is strategic, you know, we never want to understate a projected levy rate. Then, a week ago today, our district put an indefinite term maintenance and operations supplemental levy effective July 1st, 2021 before the voters for $12.7 million per year. And that passed. That makes us the 6th public school district in the state to have this type of levy in place. There was high voter turnout, 8,333 voters, or 42.28% of the voters. We needed a simple majority to pass. And that election will be canvassed by the county tomorrow. It is, of course, absolutely fulcrum to the operations of our school district to keep all of our schools open and to offer the programs that we do. It's 35% of our current fiscal year budget. The total now is in statewide, and this type of supplemental levy is $214 million, or that equals, for this year's state appropriation, it's equal to 11.2 of the state appropriation. Then if I shift to state news, we've been talking now, I've been reporting out to you for several months that there's the likelihood of a mild recession in the forecast. And last Friday, our governor's, Governor Little's head of the Department of Financial Management has announced that there's going to be a 1% rescission for all agency budgets for this fiscal year, so which started July 1st of 2019, so we're 5 months into this fiscal year, for all general fund agency budgets except K-12. And that those agencies must submit a written plan to implement these funding reductions this week. Governor Little also asked these agencies for the next prospective 2 fiscal years to expect additional cuts and to be prepared for that. He's also saying, however, it's his intention to increase K-12's appropriation. If you recall, Superintendent Yubera's draft September budget for next fiscal year 21, was asking for an increase of $100 million, a little over 5%. But 30% of that increase alone is just due to student growth in Idaho, so it's already statutorily required unless they amend all those statutes. And of course, the governor opens the legislative session the first week in January with his budget request, which then also ties into work that's been occurring since May. Governor Little configured an education task force, and they have been meeting very regularly, and with a due date of last Monday to come up with recommendations to bring to the governor, which they'll do this Thursday. They've come up with 5 recommendations, put the summary page and then a more detailed presentation. I'm not going to go through them, but Superintendent Yubera's draft budget last September, the biggest portion of that $100 million increase was for something in terms of what's called the teacher career ladder, to be determined by the outcome of the education task force. So not only has the state superintendent, but also our governor is looking towards these recommendations. We as a school board and administration have a board meeting next Monday with our Senator Woodward, Representative Dixon, and newly appointed State Board of Education, Sean Keogh. And it's my expectation, this is already an agenda item to discuss these recommendations, and I would expect they would want to hear from us as a school district on these recommendations. That concludes my remarks. Do you have any questions?
Very good. Thank you very
thank
much.
you.
Yeah.
Very much. It was very nice. Now we have some action items, and the first one we have here is the consent agenda.
Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that is adopted. Other action items under administration, alternate authorization teacher to new certification, and that's for Mason Jones at Lake Ponderay High School. So,
Jeff, do you want to address that?
Thank you. I'm Jeff Penrose, principal at Lake Ponderay High School. This is Mason Jones. He completed his teaching education program in Florida, and then moved up here and and started working in therapeutic schools where he was not required to get a certificate, so never actually went through that process. So he's been teaching for over 10 years for some of the highest risk kids around. He's a very good math teacher. We just need to get some piece of paper behind him. So we're requesting that you approve the alternative authorization while he pursues the ABCTE teacher certification program, which is starting immediately.
does he realize it snows here?
He's been here over 10 years. Yeah. He's been working north of here, actually. This is over for him, yeah.
Has he met the educational requirements? It's just a matter of getting him recertified in this state?
Well, he'll have to go through ABCTE at this point, which is the alternate path.
Yeah.
Mhm. Excuse
So
me?
then you
Is that what
How
Lewis
long
Clark
is this?
State, like the?
It depends on, he'll
Is this a
start the
two-year
program.
process?
I don't know.
Lewis Clark State's called the PACE program. So
How long is this ABCTE process? Is it a 1 or a 2 year?
It's typically a 1-year program, requires some coursework and then passing.
And then he'll have a mentor, and that mentor will check in with him over the course of the next 2-3 years before he gets his final. He'll get an alternate, and then eventually he'll get the initial, and when he goes for the full certificate, he'll have to submit it back to the state.
In their requirement, you have to finish the full certificate within 2 years on this alternate certification?
Not if you're in process.
Any other questions? Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve this.
If I can just add one other thing. We had some action research into the vaccine thing last year at my school. It's not strictly a vaccine, but I had a generous donor come in and offer a free flu shot to any student in my school who wanted it. I went on Facebook, we sent letters home, we talked to every parent who came administer in the school. It did, we did.
And I think it helped with.
It helped, it definitely did, but I was shocked. I mean, I had parents who just said, absolutely not, do not take a needle anywhere near my kid. You are a school, not a doctor, and get out of my face. So
Interesting.
It was interesting. I'd be glad to talk about it. It was a rough haul. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Jim, thank
Okay,
you.
so I'll make a motion to approve the alternate authorization teacher to new certification for Mason Jones.
I second that.
Been moved and seconded to approve this as stated. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion is adopted. Next, we have alternate authorization teacher to new certification, Melanie Kerr, Sandpoint Middle School. So,
Yeah, Casey is not here.
would you like to take that?
Well, we may have to postpone that for the next meeting. I'm not, I don't want to give you inaccurate information on
He
that.
did provide an agenda request in your packet. He's just not here to speak on her behalf unless you had questions, or you could table
It's pretty
this
thin.
till next.
What,
It's, it's pretty thin.
okay,
There's not quite, you know.
So we'd like more.
So you could move to table
yeah.
till the next meeting.
I would then make a motion to table the alternate authorization teacher to new certification for Melanie Kerr until next meeting.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded that we table this motion having to do with certification for Melanie Kerr until our next meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion is adopted. Next, we have some
No.
information. These are announcements. We had our ISBA convention, so I would like to please open the announcements with what some of our board members had to bring back to us.
Well, I have the results of the resolution voting that we conducted down there. And as a board, we were unanimous in all but 3 of the resolutions. On Resolution 2, that is the extension of supplemental levies, we were split 4 to 1, 4 ayes and 1 nay. It did pass. There was a confusion on one of these, and that was that was the resolution, I think, resolution number 10, which was the limit on non-elected charter school authorizers.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't know that the executive board had recommended do not pass. I thought they recommended pass, but they recommended do not pass. And we were split because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Those of you that weren't here that gave me votes voted to pass it. Those of us that sat through the
Yeah.
communication down there said, no, we're not gonna go
So
that
it's
route.
split.
And then we took Lonnie's, who had his for the majority, so we split his half and half, so it was 2 1/2, 2 1/2. And it did fail.
Yeah,
It did fail, okay.
Basically what happened is that the charter school representative said that ISBA has welcomed us, and if you pass this, we're dropping out.
Well, there you go. That would, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one case where
Yeah,
just giving you our vote would have been more helpful because you've learned something.
yeah, exactly. So, and then the last one was on public school facilities defined. The executive board, that's resolution number 14, the executive board recommended do not pass. We were split 1 and 4, 1 aye, 1 and 4 nay, and it did not pass. It was, it failed. And then resolution 15 was pulled by the district that presented it. All the rest of them went along with the
With the recommendation.
ISB recommendations. There was only one resolution that passed unanimously, and that was the sale of property in closed
Executive
session.
session. Okay, thank you. Okay,
Yeah,
Superintendent?
couple things, and I don't want to take anything away from any of the administrators here, so I'll kind of stay specific away from your schools. But a couple things. First of all the Veteran Day assemblies throughout the district were a great show of patriotism, and the students really got into it. So it's probably one of the best days of school in the whole year, in my opinion.
Hopes is tomorrow.
Your hopes is
9:20.
tomorrow. Yeah. NIC math competition. You may have saw that Sandpoint High School's math team won and took down Coeur d'Alene Charter, which has been the last 3 years they had won. So again, it was nice to see the Sandpoint High School math team back on top. And then also congratulations to the Sandpoint High School swim team, the girls swim team, for having a state championship. And I guess they just, after day one, they were doing okay, but they just stepped it up day two and swam better than they ever had to claim the title. And I had contact with some parents, and they had penciled it out that if everybody did exactly what they were supposed to do, they were going to beat Bishop Kelly by 12 points. And they beat them by 25 points.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, accolades to the swim team. So.
Okay, thank you. Bill?
I just have an announcement. Jeff Penrose and I, for the next 2 days, are going to be up at Bonner's Ferry doing their accreditation review. And so it's always interesting being part of those, especially as a secondary principal, being able to visit other high schools regionally and or out of the region. We're going to learn a lot and bring back a lot here in the school. And so it'll be the first time I've done one with Jeff, and so it'll be kind of nice having somebody from the same district sitting on those review teams.
Jackie? anything?
Lynette and I will be serving on North Idaho STEM Academy, their STEM certification team tomorrow on Thursday. So again, we hope to bring back lots of good ideas
And I just want to emphasize one more time with Jackie, being able to meet the team that was that went through that STEM certification. It's basically just opening up your whole school to 4 individuals to just go through every aspect of your school, and you know, it can be stressful. And they came through with flying colors, and again,
it's a high bar.
it was a high bar, absolutely. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Any others? Yeah.
It's actually Lake Conroe School District is being represented by myself on the state team through the Department of Health and Welfare. We had a settlement, the Jeff D settlement, and what happened is the Department of Health and Welfare and Children's Mental Health put into a partnership, and they have an interagency governance team, and I've been asked to represent school districts across the state, so I will be sitting on that team. I had my first meeting last week.
Thank you. Commendation to Dr. Dunn and Dana for gutting it out to the very end. I appreciate that very much. We do have one other item, which is executive session, which will entertain a motion on that.
So I would make a motion that we move into executive session as provided for in Idaho Code Title 74, Section 206, subsection 1F, to communicate with legal counsel for the public agency to discuss the legal ramifications of and legal options for pending litigation or controversies not yet being litigated but imminently likely to be litigated. The mere presence of legal counsel at an executive session does not satisfy this requirement.
It's been moved and second that we go into executive session as stated. Roll call vote, please.
Roll call vote. Trustee Williams?
Aye.
Trustee Superger?
Aye.
Trustee Decker?
Aye.
Trustee Lewis?
Aye.
Trustee Kelly?
Aye. Therefore, we will adjourn to executive session.